Hello, I'm going to present about Dragons Out software testing book to be used in schools as a course book in different classes. Let me start by sharing my presentation. So here we go. Dragons Out as a course book for software testing. So I delivered 2 webinars, and now this is going to be an English version of that webinar for any teachers anywhere in the world, most likely, of course, those who speak English and teach in English for their students. My background briefly, 25 years in software testing. I recently won the Eurostar Testing Excellence Award, a lot thanks to my initiative of bringing software testing to children in publishing the Dragons Out books, different languages. But let's go to the agenda. So first, I'm going to briefly cover the book project, how the book came to be. Then we are going to talk about fantasy as a way to teach software testing. And then most of the time I'm going to spend on the book resources. So the book itself, explain a little bit how it works as a course book and the supporting resources. Also, I'm going to share feedback survey results, so some input from teachers who have seen and used the book as a course book. So why should we teach software testing for children? It starts from the fact that there's more and more software in the world over time, and that software is not always of good quality. Obviously, everybody wants good quality, but it costs. It needs to be done. There needs to be not only coding, but also testing. There needs to be a focus on good quality. This is seen as a lack of not only coders, developers in the IT industry, but also in the lack of testers, people with testing skills, not necessarily testing professionals, although there are also lots of those. So the need for coding has been seen in our societies for a long time. For 10 years, it's been increasing, and then now you can see coding classes and clubs in schools, in elementary schools, in different classes. But testing is not really there yet. So what I want to change, what I need everybody's help to change, is to bring software testing also to schools. And Dragons Out book, with its supports material, it is exactly the kind of book for that. Best fit is for a coding class or for a math class. The book project took several years. I got the idea first in 2014 when I saw Finnish author Linda Liukas publishing Hello Ruby, which was a coding book for children of kindergarten age. I had time to author a book in 2018-19 on my sabbatical, and then 2019-2020 I simultaneously authored and managed the publication of both Finnish and English versions of the Dragons Out book. Also had some crowdfunding campaign to get some illustration together, and funded. I found Avain to be my Finnish publisher and Austin McCauley to be my English publisher. So that's really great from school point of view. At the same time, I also organized a campaign of donations from ICT industry, so companies and associations in Finland especially, but also worldwide, who wanted to donate software testing books to schools in their local areas. So that was really, really nice, and it was really nice to hand out the certificate or diploma of donations to the Finnish Minister of Education. Let's talk about fantasy. So fantasy is an interesting way to explain software testing. Analogy in general works as a way to explain something difficult, and I think fantasy works as an attractive element to children especially, and it turns out it works really nice in explaining concepts of software development and software testing. So maybe main storyline I use throughout the book is that there are dragons which are harassing and attacking villages and castles, and there are knights and also ordinary villagers who are fighting those dragons and trying to vanquish the dragons, sometimes even kill the dragons. And the dragons are representing the defects or bugs in the software. The villages and castles are the software. Knights are the testers and developers, and villagers are the users who also help in testing. So let me give you a few more examples of the analogies. Here we can see an annoying dragon, which is difficult to find, but quite easy to get rid of. Once you can find it. It doesn't fly, although it has small things, wings. It breathes fire. What it likes to do is to eat lambs. Now, so these attributes to the dragon are similar when we attributes to a defect called a memory leak defect. In a similar fashion, it's very annoying when the memory leaks and the system slows down. Hard to find, or you know it's there, and once you find it, it could be very simple to remove. Just change one character in one line, and the defect might be gone. So what I'm trying to explain is not only about the defect type, but also about what kind of defect it is, in keeping up the analogy in what kind of dragon we are talking about in a particular chapter in the book. There are also other types of dragons. There are robin dragons, which come in many colors and shapes: green, gray, big, small. Sometimes they are easy to get rid of, sometimes hard. Sometimes they're easy to find, sometimes hard. Some fly, some don't. Some breathe fire, some don't, etc., etc. The common factor is that they steal food and treasure. As defects, these would be functional defects. So defects that have to do with the functionality, how the software works. Does it actually do what it's supposed to do, or calculate something wrong? And in a similar fashion, then with dragons come in different shapes, functionality defects come in different shapes. Sometimes they are really critical. Sometimes small defects, but doesn't really matter. They confuse a little bit out there. They still can be removed and probably should be removed. Another example is the mean dragon. So a dragon that is really particular. It wants to steal food in secrecy. It is black. And there are also other attributes, but what this represents is a security defect. So in a similar fashion, a criminal wants to steal information from different information systems, break into those systems and steal information or even money, and do this in secrecy. And they're also called black hats. So that's the color black there. So the analogy works. Another example, underground dragon. So these dragons are not flying, but making tunnels, using the tunnels to go to cellars in different villages and castles, and then steal the food again. These dragons represent hardware defects, so they are underlying defects. When you test, you might think a defect is in the software, but sometimes when you look more closely, it's evident that the defect is actually in the hardware. So the hardware needs to be replaced, any device that the software runs on. Also nice dragons. So there are many reasons why I have nice dragons. One reason is that my pilot readers, a lot of children, including my son, said, but why do we need to kill all the dragons? Why are they all bad? Dragons are nice, and that's true. There are also nice dragons. And so nice dragons actually help people. So in a similar fashion, some defects actually are useful. Here's defect, a defect seeding defect. So what that means is a defect that has been put into the software on purpose. And the idea is that once you find these defects that are seeded, you have found also all the real defects. So it is a technique of having enough test coverage, knowing that you have tested enough. So defects that help finding other defects. We have, of course, other characters, people. So knights, as I said, are programmers or testers, both. Have chose this format, especially because modern software development is about teams. People work together, autonomous teams, where you have all the skills needed to create good quality software. And that means coding knowledge and testing knowledge and other types of knowledge as well. So knights are both developers and testers. We have, of course, children, some which are villagers and also grown-up villagers. In general, villagers help spot the dragons, and then they help the knights to actually vanquish the dragons. In a similar fashion, villagers represent users. Users are helping the programming teams, the development teams to test the software, sometimes on purpose, sometimes as an accident. So a defect has remained in the software and only found by a user actually using the software. There are particular types of users which are technical support, so hunters in the story. So what hunters do is they can actually take care of lots of different types of dragons. They can kill dragons even sometimes, and if not, they can ask knights to help. So in a similar fashion, technical support or production operations, IT support, people who maintain the software, they can also take care of many problems in the software, and sometimes they call for the development team. Sometimes they are even in the team that develops the software, and that would be called DevOps. Then there are also lords and ladies, so they need to pay for the salaries, of course, of the knights, maintain the knights armies of knights. In a similar fashion, somebody needs to pay for the software. So lords and ladies represent the product owners or managers of the company who are paying for the software, owning the software. There are also sages. So sages help with very special knowledge. They help villagers, they help knights, they help lords and ladies. In real world, experts in different areas like usability or security or performance help the software development teams and the businesses to create good software. Great. So those were the analogy examples. Fantasy really works. It's a great way to explain software testing concepts. So let's look at the book in more close view. So book resources. So I'm the author, Kari Kakkonen. My illustrator is Adrian Sell. All the rights, text, and the illustrations are in my company Dragons Out Oy, which I founded for this book. Book is currently available in Finnish and English, and at the moment, French, Polish, and Hungarian translation projects are ongoing. I have a website dedicated for the books, which is dragonsout.com. So there are lots of information there, resources and blog and everything. The book structure is such that once you read the interesting fantasy story that grows and grows chapter by chapter, you always learn software testing and also a bit about software development and ICT industry in general. So once you have read a few paragraphs in a book, there will be always a text box explaining what just happened in the story, what that means in the real world in software testing terms. Each chapter is named by a defect type, so a dragon. And obviously, when you need a particular testing type to find this kind of a defect type, so also the testing types are introduced. As you go, different software development terms and concepts are explained and expanded bit by bit. So the basics are in chapter 1, and then you go for chapter 2 and 3 and 4, etc. You will learn more and more. So the chapters are building on the previous chapters. Each chapter also has an exercise page at the end with correct answers or sample answers, and then also there's a gamification element in the on the last page of each chapter, which is a character sheet for the dragon that just appeared in the story. It also works as a conclusion for what you just learned in the chapter. In the end of the book, there's a terminology section. Here's a picture of screenshots of each of the 13 chapters. There are actually 14 defect types because in chapter 9, I'm actually introducing 2 different defect types, so 2 different dragons. It fits to the story to do it at that point. So different defect types, and as you can see also from the screenshots, the text boxes are out there. Every now and then there's a text box explaining the testing concepts that just appeared in the story. Also illustration every now and then, so not on every page, but every few pages there's a nice illustration to give a nice reading experience for people of all ages. But obviously children like pictures, so I really wanted to have pictures in the book, and I'm really happy about the illustration here. Here's a slide about the exercise pages. So this one is a screenshot of chapter 11. So on the left, you can see that there are 4 exercises, and on the right, you can see that there's a separate page, answers to exercises, where you have the correct answers for question 1, and then sample answers for question 2 and 3. And this is the structure that is used throughout the book. So always the first question in each chapter is a multiple choice question with correct answers and justifications in the end. The question 2 is always about testing question. So keeping in real world, expanding a little bit on what we learned about the real world in software testing, and basically making the student to think what testing means, what it could mean in the scenario. Question 3 is always a story continuation question. So keeping true to the story, there's a story plot twist. What would happen if something else happened? How would the story continue? And so that also obviously keeps the testing concept there, but it's also about creativity and trying to figure out alternative outcomes to a situation. And number 4 is a gamifying element. So where a drawing exercise and a playing exercise alternate in different chapters. In this particular chapter 11, it is a playing example there. Let's play, and idea there is to learn the concept of that we just read through in the chapter in the form of a game or in the form of drawing something. So a different way to drive the learning into the minds and memories of students. Here are a few examples of that last page of each chapter. So there's the character sheet. So always the dragon is introduced as a character sheet, and also the similar defect type is introduced, and also how to get rid of that. So this is, as said, a nice conclusion for each chapter. So to take a bigger picture, what kind of testing concepts do we cover in your book? Many, actually. First of all, roles. So we talk about different testing and development roles that are there. Testing is not an island. There are other roles, developers, owners, product owners, users, as discussed. And we go through different lifecycle models also, so different types of software development, what it is to develop new software, what it is to extend an existing software. We talk about Agile a little bit and DevOps, so how teams work in today's world in common unified autonomous teams, and how can they maybe release often to customers. There's also different business concepts explained, so like software for a car, or software for a bank, or e-commerce, and there are also different contexts of when software is testing and how it's tested. So different examples from the real world. Obviously, the software defect types and the test types as discussed, and I'm also covering a little bit on test automation and a little bit on regression testing. So repeating all those tests often enough to make sure nothing broke. So lots of knowledge is transferred through going through a book. There's also a supporting presentation, and actually it works also as a standalone. So it's free. It is Creative Commons license, so any teacher in the world can use it. It is worth 1 or 2 hours in classroom, depending on how much time you spend on exercises. It comes in PowerPoint, and I have also recorded the delivery of the PowerPoint in Finnish and in English, which are obviously the main languages I started with, but I have lots of volunteers translating this free PowerPoint to many languages. So the number of languages is growing all the time. As you can see, lots of the languages in the world are already covered. This is really great. All these presentations are available in that link down there, and also I'm sharing them through other means, for example, freeed.com. Here's an example from that free PowerPoint. Similar example is also in the book. So the drawing exercise. So here in this exercise, you have to think about the defect that you have encountered. Then, if the defect was big, what could that mean as a dragon? Probably a big dragon, right? So you try to think of an equivalent dragon, and then you try to draw this dragon. So if it's a big dragon, you need to draw a big dragon that fills most of the page. And then also a fun element here, when you are in a class full of students, it's really fun to share what people draw to others. I've used Padlet for that. It's free and it's easy to use from the mobile phones of students. So actually, I found this sharing part was, for some students, even the best part of the exercise. But drawing is also good. So you learn about testing concepts through not only the typical means, but also through drawing and sharing. Another example from that PowerPoint is actual testing exercise. So students are encouraged to choose a game in the software, but typically they to choose a game from their own mobile phones, and then they try to pick an angle like performance. So is there something slow, and then go through that software, that game, and try to think of slow parts or slow places in that software, and then write down your observations, and those will be potential defects. And again, sharing is good fun. So it's when you learn about testing skills, it's important that you also use them try to apply them in your real life in testing. There are also more resources. I'm expanding the number of resources on that website, dragonsound.com. There's a specific page there, as you can see. There's all the testing terminology is there, more exercises are there, references to testing websites and books. So it's a good place to keep in mind. As I've been discussing with teachers, this is my suggested curriculum outline. So how would you use the book and the presentation? I suggest you always start with a Creative Commons presentation. So it's called Dragon Lesson in software testing. You start with that. It takes 1 to 2 hours. That's a good introduction to software testing. And if you don't have books, that's a good introduction anyway. Then you can go on going through the book, and there are alternative ways to do that. You can have some pre-reading before a lesson. You could read together at the lesson, and you can have homework. So after the lesson, whichever way you do, you can go through each chapters one by one. So somehow read the chapter and then have a class to discuss that defect type and the testing type to see what they understand, and get some more understanding there. And then do the exercises together. Some are actually designed to be done together, and then you can try to apply the skills in the chapter to actually test something in their mobile phones or tablets or computers, whatever you have available. And so that would take additional 13 classes or hours, most likely as well. So that's how I suggest you use the presentation and the book. Let's have a quick look at what teachers think about the book, where can it be used, etc. Can it be used? So the information comes from 2 surveys and many discussions with teachers. The general consensus from the teachers is that the book and the presentation works for many ages, mainly for ages 10 to 15, and that would be classes 4 to 9 in Finnish school system anyway. And it's really liked. People like a book. Students like a book. Teachers like a book. And then I also have survey results, so that you can see in the next slides. There are 2 surveys. First survey was done to teachers who got the donations from ICT companies, and so these are answers from that. So the question was, which teaching subject, which class is suitable to teach this concept? The biggest answer was the coding. So teachers thought that coding class is the best fit for this topic. Also robotics class, some math, some game design, some mother tongue class as well. I had the same question run in a teacher trade fair with lots of more answers. So teachers who had discussed with me on my stand in trade fair and took a look at the book, etc., etc. And here, math class seems a bigger fit. The coding is a big answer as well, but also math is interesting. I think in general we can see that software testing can be taught along with many other testing subjects. It's not only a coding or math class thing. It could be arts class, it could be science class thing, etc. You can fit it in many places. Then there's a question about which parts of the book are really interesting to children, and so this is again the answers from the first survey. So dragons in the story are obviously most interesting things, which is the purpose as well. So the attraction comes from the story, and as even as a side effect, you actually learn about software testing, and that could be why the teacher wants to have the topic there. But the fantasy story makes it really interesting for children. If we look at the same, the answers for the same question at the trade fair, story and the dragons are again what teachers think are most interesting parts of the book. But also you got the exercises here, you got the book quality, you got software testing, racing in the answers. So many things are interesting about the book. Another question was, when do you use a book? And again, this is from the first survey. So most of the teachers use the book at the class. But also some use it in coding clubs, some as extra homework, some other contexts not mentioned. If we look at the same answers from the trade fair, teachers thought that they would use a book at the classes again, also in clubs and extra homework. So actually the same answers get popularity here. But I think in general we can say organized learning is best. So even though it's a book, it could be just extra homework, it's still the best way to get the software testing learning happening is to do it together in a class. So it doesn't need to be a full class, it could be part of a year, part of a period in math class or coding class, etc. Wherever you want to fit it as a teacher. To conclude, there are 6 takeaways how children can learn testing. So fantasy example, then turn it into ICT real life terms, testing terms, developer terms, IT terms. In general, be really clear and concise. So even though testing is a complex topic, you really need to learn many things to be really effective and a professional tester. Still, you can have the key things delivered in really clear and concise way. So that's what I tried to do, and I think managed to do very well in the book. It's a good idea to focus on exercises, so some theory and then lots of exercises. That's how learning happens, and that relates to next learning there, which is using all the senses. So easily reading would be just seeing, but it's also important to use other senses, so listening, so that you be reading together, talking about what you learned, and drawing. So for example, doing something physical. The learning will be better using more senses. And also common sharing of results is great. It encourages to do exercise as well. And it's fun. And the last bit is maybe the most important bit. So try the ideas immediately. You can test anything. It doesn't need to be a buggy software that is currently under development. You can test something that is already released, something in your own mobile phones, in its students' mobile phones. That's fine. You will find interesting ideas from there. And you realize quite soon that there's nothing like perfect software. There are bugs even in the released software always. So you always need for some more testing. Right. In that link, in the first link, dragonsite.com, there are links to the publisher websites, and you can go there, buy the books for your schools, for Finland, for a Finnish version. I currently have a softback version discount campaign with my publisher Avine in that link. So let's get those books to those schools. I'd like to thank everybody and try to educate children in software testing in schools. And you can follow me, obviously. You can find this presentation on that second link there. I'll be happy to answer any questions that you might have. So let's be in contact. Thank you. you very much.